CEE,
Central Europe Explained,
an IDM podcast series
powered by Erste Group.
Episode 60. What will 2024 bring? A view from the IDM. Welcome to this special episode of Central Europe Explained. I am Gloria Becerril, and today we're wrapping up an incredible season and an unforgettable year with a roundtable discussion featuring the IDM team. 2024 has been a year of decisive moments for Central and Eastern Europe. From elections to shifting dynamics within the EU, we've tackled these themes in our publications, podcast episodes, talks, and events throughout the year. Today, we'll reflect on these moments and look ahead to what 2025 might bring. For this episode, we've prepared a little twist. In front of us, we have a bowl filled with questions. Questions that dive into the challenges, lessons, and opportunities of 2024 and beyond. Each team member will pick a question at random, share their insights, and we'll see where the conversation takes us. Of course, if anyone feels inspired to add to a colleague's response, feel free to jump in. So let's get started. Who has question number one?
Yeah, that's me actually.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm Daniel Martin. And the question is as follows. What was the most pivotal moment or event of 2024 for you, either professionally through the IDM or personally as a citizen of this region? Well, when I put some thoughts into this question, I must say that for me, the most pivotal event of this year is not a single moment, let's say, but rather a culmination of global and regional developments that happened not only in our region, but also in the world globally. And also all this in connection with my personal development, because as you know, as of January 2025, I will be no longer employed at IDM. And as I'm now currently preparing leaving the institute after 7 years, I actually also put some thoughts, and some kind of summarizing of all the developments which I actually experienced during this time. And I was actually struck by the whole transformation that happened or that has occurred both within the institute, but also globally, or at least in our target region of the IDM. Actually, since 2018, when I started at the IDM. So, as I said, there is not a single pivotal moment of this year for me, but it's rather this combination, all the challenges that developed. We went through the global pandemic of COVID. We are facing the Russian invasion, full-scale invasion in Ukraine, and all the consequences that are connected to that, shaping, of course, the whole security and the geopolitical structure on the European continent. Last but not least, also all the challenges to democracy, demographic changes, particularly in the region of Central Eastern Southeastern Europe.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been quite a hectic period. I don't know if anyone wants to mention another important moment.
For me, one of the most pivotal moments in 2024, where we also did an event about actually at IDM, were the European parliamentary elections, because of course the setup of the European Parliament and its work affect every one of us, every member state and each individual, but also the IDM. And Sophia Bartel. And my question was, what do you think this event or trend revealed about the direction Central and Eastern Europe is heading? And I would say that what was revealing for me about these elections, and also maybe worrying if we look to the next year or to the future in general, is that after these elections, the main news seemed to be the center is holding. So this apparent observation that the EPP, so the Conservative European People's Party, is still very strong, and that this traditional coalition with the Social Democrats and the Renew Europe is still working very well, and that the far-right shift was not as strong as other people thought. But if we look to the new European Parliament, we have 3 far-right parties that have even one more seat than the Conservative Party. And actually, they do not even need to join forces because they can still influence the work of the European Parliament, because the EPP is ready to ally with the far-right groups, which we have already seen in some of the votes of the European Parliament regarding budget votes, but also regarding the Venezuelan president, where they allied with the far-right groups. And I think this shows that there is basically no cordon sanitaire anymore, and that the far right is being normalized, but also working with the far right is being normalized, and is in particular the ECR, the European Conservatives and Reformists, because there are other political groups that are even more on the far right. And I think this is definitely a trend that is relevant on the European level, but also in our region, and that we will also continue to observe in 2025. And we also worked on this topic at the IDM this year in a podcast episode, but also in an article in our publication Info Europa. And I think, yeah, we should also continue working on this in the next year.
Who has question number 3?
I do. My name is Rebecca Thorne. I'm a research associate here as well. And my question is, as an institute, the IDM hosted several events and talks this year. Was there a particular moment or conversation that stands out as especially impactful or thought-provoking? So I was thinking back, and the beginning of the year, it feels like quite a long time ago now, but there was one event back in February. It was the parliamentary elections in Belarus, and it really stood out to me. So the parliamentary elections, of course, that's a regular fixture at the IDM. We have regular panel discussions and briefings on all the elections in the region, and this year there's been a lot of elections. But this one really stood out to me because, for one thing, we hear so little about it. There's not very much journalism coverage, and it's not a country that we can do a lot of work with. And if I remember quite correctly, there was quite a lot of interest. We had a lot of members of the public who came to the event. And I think part of the impact is probably because it's just so scary, but it was also striking because the speakers were particularly engaging. It was 3 people from Belarus, academics and analysts, and they were able to tell personal stories, which is always particularly powerful, in this case particularly so.
Who has question number 4?
I do. I'm Hannah. I'm a trainee here at the IDM. And question number 4 is, what were the biggest lessons learned in 2024 about democracy, integration, or resilience in Central and Eastern Europe? I think that the biggest lessons learned about democracy and resilience especially were that there are some anti-fake news campaigns that have been established, especially in Lithuania and Moldova. There were institutes founded that were dealing with that to reduce the interference of fake news, especially during election times. And I think that has been a great lesson learned, how important it is to actually deal with that fake news on the internet.
Who has question number 5 now?
I do. I'm Daniela, and I chose the very easy question number 5, which is, what do you see as the greatest opportunity or challenge for Central and Eastern Europe in 2025? And since we're all not thinking anymore, I just ask Perplexity, AI, to give me an answer. And it was quite interesting because, of course, I thought about the same answer before. And it gave me the economic growth as one of the greatest opportunity. Of course, as we see from the recovery from COVID and from other economic challenges, we see that Eastern Europe has done much better, performed actually quite better economically than the West. To generalize it, of course. So there is a big potential actually for growth, for consumerism, for investments, and at the same time we have the issue that big trading partners like Germany from Western Europe are actually weakened, and we have to see what's coming up and in how far this has consequences on the region. So there is this economic thing. But let's say my spontaneous thought, which is not based on AI, was actually Trump. But this is a global fear, I think, and not just a regional one. And then I was thinking about Putin, and then I was thinking about Orban, and then I was thinking of Georgescu and Vucic, and then my answer would be actually the biggest opportunity are those men in power that we really have to find a change. That's the opportunity here, and I guess there are some changes coming up maybe at 2025. Let's see.
Thank you, Daniela. Very good insights. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything.
One interesting thing that I learned about democracy this year is how difficult it is to restore it. And speaking from the Polish perspective, we saw that the Law and Justice government, which could not form a government, and this meant that was lost power after 8 years, left actually a lot of damage to the democratic institutions in the country. And it is so hard to restore them, to bring democracy back on track. This is, of course, a process, but the expectations were, I guess, that it would be much faster than it is.
Who is next? Who has next question? Malvina.
So I'm Malvina Talik, I'm a research associate at the IDM. And my question is, how can the IDM continue to contribute to the region's progress in areas like governance, civil society, or cross-border cooperation? So I think that so far we have been doing a good job in this regard, considering our capacities and opportunities. We can't, of course, do things for decision makers or civil society. They have to take the decisions or take actions themselves. Here we'd like to outline especially a couple of our activities that I think that contribute a lot to the developments, or at least to extending the expertise on the region. And one of them is our policy papers. We usually publish around 3. This year they were about the Temporary Protection Directive and its future. The Temporary Protection Directive is something aimed for Ukrainian refugees. And we're advising against leaving it at this temporary status, but rather making something more permanent. Our advice was not listened to, so I would say that our task in the future is rather that we can reach out more to decision makers or make our voices even more heard. The question is how. So just what I think we could change. Another policy paper was about normalizing youth involvement towards an inclusive Belgrade-Pristina dialogue. As far as I know, this is something that is still ongoing, and there are many great insights in this policy paper that I think could be listened to in the Western Balkans, but also beyond. And also very timely policy paper, embracing the momentum, why the next Commission should prioritize EU enlargement and reform, which we hope that the next Commission may take into consideration, because again, it has a lot of insights. And these policy papers are not only something that shows our expertise. We collaborate with them with experts from our network, with experts from other think tanks. So I think there is a lot of great information there. And of course, the IDM is also a source of information for wider public, not only for decision makers and experts. So for our events, which have already been mentioned, I think that we bring a lot of light to what is going on in Central and Eastern Europe, in countries ranging from Lithuania to Albania. I think that we covered pretty much each country this year. And we are a great platform for organizations from the region, because there are so many reaching out to us. I think that sometimes it might be even too much for us and for our capacities, but we see individuals, academic researchers, but also embassies, ministries, and think tanks, big and small. And I think that we should just stay on track, keep doing what we do within our capacities and possibility.
Thank you, Malvina. Sounds like there's a lot of work to do for the next year. Next question.
Next, my name is Kamila Bogdanova and I'm research assistant at the IDM. My question is, what role do you think citizens will play in shaping the future of the region, and how can institutions like IDM better connect with them? In my opinion, the youth and the civil society organizations are the driving forces for innovation, sustainability, and grassroots policy influence. As a representative of the young people, I think we bring fresh perspectives, creativity, and energy to tackling the pressing issues like climate change, digital transformation, and, of course, inclusive governance. The openness of the young people to new ideas and collaboration across borders can, of course, foster innovative solutions to our regional problems. And I'm sure that IDM could serve as a great example to the other institutions in empowering youth people and creating opportunities for them. Every year, IDM organizes summer schools, young scholars forums, the Nubius Awards. Also, most of our projects are directed to the younger people. Last year, we've been conducting EU Act 2 project, and currently we are running UREU project, which is directly engaged with the young people. So I hope for successful deliverables of this project, of course.
I completely agree. I think citizens should be, in general, more involved in decision-making processes. And I think also their opinions should be listened to more, maybe. So maybe to give a very brief example, that I think due to the rise of the far right and Eurosceptic parties, we have this opinion that the general public is very EU skeptic. But then again, in the last Eurobarometer, actually it showed that trust in the EU is as high as it hasn't been in 17 years. So maybe there's also sometimes a mismatch between the perceived public opinion of citizens and the real opinion of citizens, and maybe that should be taken more into account.
I think you have to be careful, because sometimes what populists do, they follow up very much on what people seem to want, but then this does not necessarily bring very good results. So when you look at how politicized certain topics have become, like migration, how xenophobic our societies are becoming, then there is also this other side of the coin sometimes to this listening to citizens very attentively. It can be blown out of proportion. And also what some of those parties are asking for is direct democracy, which is very much listening exactly to the citizens and involving them very actively in decision making. And I'm not saying it's bad, but we have to be aware of like two sides of this coin.
Yeah, I agree. Because if you look, for instance, in the case of Moldova, that held a referendum of including the goal of joining the European Union into the constitution, which was very narrowly only passed. And we have seen also in the past that there are referenda on very complex issues that are held that can then be hijacked for political purposes. And this is really something that I believe should be watched carefully, because the remedy is certainly not direct democracy, especially in cases when you have not the guarantee that the information for the participating citizens is equally accessible and neutral, to the extent how it can be neutral, so that it at least is not propaganda, fake news influencing decisions, which is also something that we have seen recently in the presidential election in Romania, for instance.
Maybe I will quickly jump in. We were talking about propaganda and the rising popularity of the right extra parties. Maybe it's important to enhance the media literacy between the population, because as the social media right now expand and almost every citizen is consuming information from social media, I think it's really important to educate children, young people on media literacy, as we see it's a really important issue nowadays.
As well as other age groups.
Yeah.
And I mean, I completely agree. It's even easier to educate young people because they are still in the training, they're at school. It's absolutely a good idea to do so, but I find it so much harder to reach out to people who already work or are in pension.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the technology also changes so fast, and they sometimes don't understand that what they keep seeing is not true, that may be fake news, but they believe it because it's everywhere on their social media, WhatsApp, wherever.
And maybe that is why think tanks such as the IDM are important, right? To spread this information and make people conscious about how important it is to pay attention to fake news and which kind of information we should rely on. We have two more papers on the bowl left. Peter.
I'm Peter Tekert, Research Associate with the IDM. As a member of IDM, what has been your proudest achievement or most meaningful moment this year? So maybe I would say an event I organized in February together with Paul Lenway, because he's maybe the most famous and certainly the most oldest political analyst in Austria. So that's why it was for me a really interesting experience to meet him, to speak with him. And the event was about mafia state structure in Eastern Europe. And I think it is an important topic, because if we want to understand the illiberalism in our region, maybe it's better to focus on the economical side of these regimes, and not only the ideology, which is more a fake or a theater. And it's most important to understand how these regimes are working in an economical sense. But meeting Paul and White was maybe the most interesting and proudest moment for me in this year.
Amazing. Thank you, Petra. Does anyone else want to share one of their best moments this year at the IDM?
It's hard to single out events or things that happened, because if we look back, I mean, we've done again 50 plus initiatives that we've implemented, so it's really hard to come up with something really special. But maybe, you know, I don't have like a fanboy moment like Peter does, but we had a couple of interesting people that we worked with, which was certainly special. And if we look at our initiative that we did for this year's General Assembly of IDM, where we were discussing 20 years of the Big Bang enlargement of the Central and Eastern European countries joining the European Union, we there had a fantastic panel with fantastic guests, and I really had a pleasure to moderate this event, for instance.
There's something that I'm very proud of, is that we really keep our discussions very diverse. Peter has just mentioned one of the speakers who was very experienced, and we also give a chance to speakers who are very young, to activists, to academics, to experts, to politicians. And I think this is what makes us also quite unique, but also very resilient and strong as a think tank, because we have an authentic discussion there with people across generations and across fields. And we also keep gender balance most of the time, which should be something obvious nowadays, but it's not necessarily always the case. And I really appreciate that, and I'm very proud of it.
And last but not least, our director, he still needs to answer a question.
Yes, true. Thank you. Sebastian Chapman, director. My question that I picked out of this bowl is if you could share one hope or vision for Central and Eastern Europe in 2025, what would it be? And I had to laugh when I got this question because in our fixes and internal meetings, I'm not very optimistic recently, and the situation is very dire on many fields, not only in the region but also for our work, for the future of the institute, etc. But then I try to really find a positive outlook on it, and being in danger that I will now use phrases that others put on their walls as a tattoo. One thing that came to my mind when we discussed about the challenges that are arising, that has been described in many of the different answers, and then there's another election and it gets even worse, and there seems to be no light at the end of the tunnel, so to say. I went back to very challenging and dark moments in my life, and there was something that I found interesting and that helped me is that too shall pass, and there will be something else coming. It not necessarily does mean that there will be something better coming or that the situation will improve. We also should have a look at how long will this actually affect us. Trump has been mentioned, so this is something that too really shall pass because it's 4 years. But nevertheless, we have to get through these 4 years, and in order to stay positive and to stay optimistic, I would think we have seen so many different challenges for the region, but also for our work. But we're still here. We're still alive and kicking and continuing. We just have to keep going, I think. And there will be a situation where hopefully we'll get better. It's also not something, and this would be the one thing that I recommend after many long sentences, that we cannot rest in hoping that it will become better. We have to actively shape it. And regardless how tough it is, we just have to keep going, get back up, and continue our work, because I think it's important, and there are areas where we can contribute to making a difference. If we look, for instance, at the Schengen enlargement, I think we have contributed a little bit towards this achievement, and this is something that we just need to remind ourselves and then keep going.
It feels nice to conclude the episode with a glimpse of hope for the future. Thank you all for sharing your reflections and visions. It's been a privilege to hear such thoughtful insights from each one of you, and I'm sure our listeners feel the same. Before we conclude, I'd like to share one more thing with you. This time, we will not only recommend you one piece of art, but a whole special list of movie recommendations, perfect for this long, cold winter days. These suggestions are both entertaining as well as a great way to dive deeper into the history, culture, and challenges of Central and Eastern Europe. We're sure you'll find something to inspire and reflect on as we enter 2025. Thank you for joining us throughout this season of Central Europe Explained. Whether this is your first episode or you've been with us from the start, your engagement and curiosity mean the world to us. From all of us at the IDM, we wish you a peaceful and hopeful start to the new year. Stay tuned, and until next time. This was CEE, Central Europe Explained, a podcast series produced by the Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe. If you enjoyed listening to us, make sure to subscribe to the IDM podcast series on your favorite podcast platform. Additionally, you can explore our other work on our website www.idm.at. If you have any feedback or if you're interested in collaborating on a podcast episode, please do not hesitate to contact us through our social media channels at IDM Vienna or write us an email to idm@idm.at.
IDM Podcast.
Institut für den Donauraum und Mitteleuropa.
Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe.
European perspectives.
Regional actions.
Cooperation and expertise since 1953.